Okay, we're here to talk about graphing points, and we're going to talk about graphing on both the number line and then something called the coordinate plane, which we'll get to in a second. Ready to go, Luke?
Yep.
Okay, so first let's look at some points on a number line here. So that purpley point, what number is that?
+2.
Good. So that's pretty easy to see. Now this green point on the left over here, this might be a little trickier. It's between -1 and -2. What do you think that might be?
-1.5.
-1.5, good. Or we can do -1.5, same thing.
Yeah.
So one of the tricky things here is when you get to negatives, just remember that you always look when it's between two numbers, and then remember which direction you're going. So you wouldn't want to call that 2.5, even though 2 is right here, the -2. You might think, oh, it's 2.5, but actually have to remember the direction and what numbers it's between. Now, we always do number lines like this, but you could do a number line like this also, a vertical line. And so how about this red point? What is that one?
3.5.
3.5. Or in decimal?
3.5.
Good. And how about this yellow one down here?
-3.
-3. Very good. So you're pretty used to the number line. It's pretty clear what those points are. The cool thing is that we can also graph on something that's called the coordinate plane. And basically what it does is it takes a horizontal number line and a vertical number line, and it puts them together so that they both cross at 0. So let's show you what I mean by that. Here's the horizontal number line with positive and negative, and then we have the vertical number line here with positive and negative. And we call this the x-axis, and we call this the y-axis. So those number lines, we call them axes now, okay?
Okay.
And the cool thing is that you can now put a point, and that point kind of contains two values. So let's first look at this point over here. And the way we label this point, we always do it in the same order. And so this point is 6, 4. And so you might say, well, gosh, what does that mean? But let's go ahead and put in some dotted lines here. You can see that this value right here, where it comes straight down to the x-axis, what value is that?
6.
6, right? And how about when it goes horizontally over to the y-axis? What value is that?
4.
Good. So we can come up with a rule here that when we write these are called coordinates of a point, the first number is always what?
The x.
The x value, right? And the second number is what?
The y value.
Good. Okay, and we can see that with this other point here, we can also put the dotted lines in there. And so we can see that the first number, the x value down here is what?
-7.
Good. And the second value, the y value, is what?
+5.
Good. So that we can label that point -7, 5. Now let's try another point here. Right down here. See if you can, without actually drawing in the dotted lines, what are the coordinates of that point right there? What's the x value first?
-7.
Looks like a little bit to the left of that -7, right?
Sorry, -8.
Good. And how did you find the -8? What did you do looking at the diagram?
Well, you can tell between the 5 and the 10, there's 5. So,
Yep.
Each grid
Yep.
is one number.
Yep, so you went from -5, probably -6, -7, -8, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Now, how about the y coordinates of that point?
-2.
Good. And how did you get that?
Counting down from 5.
Counting down from 5 right here?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the -5.
From the -5. So this is -4, -3, -2. Good. So we can go ahead and label that point, and like you say, it's -8, -2, with that first number being the x value and the second number being the y value. Now let me just ask you, what's this point right here in the middle? What are the coordinates of that point?
0, 0.
Good. That's also called the origin. So sometimes you'll hear that name for it. And that coordinate is 0, 0. So another way to get to the y value, the -2 here, would be to start at 0 and just go down 1, 2, because that's what it's horizontally from. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, let's graph another point over here. What are the coordinates of that point?
The first one, the x value is 9.
It looks like, yep, 9. That's right. Go ahead. And what's the y value?
-10.
Good. And so we could label it just like that, right? 9, -10. So you get the idea that we always put the x value first and the y value, and that is how we always label points. Now, the coordinate plane, you see how it's kind of in 4 sections. There's a section here, the one here, and one here. Mm-hmm. And what those are called are quadrants, because there's 4 of them, so quad kind of means 4.
Yeah.
So we can actually label them, and the way that these got labeled was that this quadrant is quadrant 1, and then it goes counterclockwise. And that's just how it's done in math. There's not really a reason for that. But we call this quadrant 2, this quadrant 3, and this quadrant 4. And what's interesting is we can come up with some rules. So I'm going to give you the first rule here. In quadrant 1, both x and y are positive, because the x value would have to be positive for it to be in quadrant 1. And so would the y value, right?
Yeah.
And this point right here, 6, 4, they're both positive there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you come up with a rule for quadrant 2?
The x value has to be negative, and the y value is positive.
Good. X is negative, y is positive. How about quadrant 3?
They're both negative.
Okay, good. X and y are both negative. How about quadrant 4?
The x value is positive, and the y value is negative.
Excellent. Excellent. So you can kind of get used to how these different quadrants work. Now, before we finish up here, let's graph one more point and see what the coordinates of that point would be. See that black point right there?
Yeah.
What are the coordinates of that? It's a little bit tricky. What's the x value?
The x value is 0.
Good. That's very good. Because, right, if you draw a line up to the x-axis, it's at 0, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How about the y value?
-4.
Good. So we could label that point 0, -4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this point, or any point that's right on one of the axes, it's not in any one of the quadrants. It's kind of between quadrants always. So then you don't have a rule quite like this, because at least one of the values is going to be 0.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now you know how to graph points not just on the number line, but also on the coordinate plane.